Hello everybody, you're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host Dane Cobain. This is the weekly radio show where we chat about the local arts news. We have a different guest on each week. We head over to the Rhylight Zone for a short story and or some poetry. We catch up with Twangling Jack Ford over in the Oak Shed for a weekly album review. And we play local, unsigned and or independent music. As always, you can reach out to me here at the studio on dane.cobain at wickhamsound.org.uk. That's dane.cobain at wickhamsound.org.uk. And I'm particularly keen to hear from poets, performers, musicians, people with MP3s to share local arts news. Don't hesitate to get in touch. You can also find us on Facebook. If you search for The Art Show on Wickham Sound, you should be able to find us. And we are repeated on Wickham Sound on Monday nights. We're on the Wickham Sound Listen Again, iTunes, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. So this week we are actually going to have a Twangling Jack Ford album review special. I know, another one. But before we do that, we're going to head over to the Rhylight Zone for some more poetry from author Charles Heathcote from his collection called Shepherd's Delight.
I will read this one because it has one of my favourite words of recent times in, and I think that it discusses that situation quite well. It's called Grinagog. I never saw you smile, although I knew your mischievous smirk. The one you used at the bakery when you bulk ordered lemon buns after a visit to the diabetes clinic. I recall the glee you found in sugar, adding it by the basinful to your tea, remaining unfulfilled. You were always mauve, kept your shoulders down, eyes on the pavement, scurried through town hoping to get hit by a bus. Perhaps I did see your smile but never noticed. You didn't catapult through days, a thrill-seeking adventurer grinning with the adrenaline of it all. You were content with small pleasures, found delight in the simplicity of a lemon bun. The lemon bun bit is actually true, and perhaps more so than anyone could guess. My grandmother was diabetic and loved sugar, and after her death, she'd been suffering with vascular dementia, and we discovered that she had filled her microwave with lemon buns, and it took me back to in Three Things About Elsie by Joanna Cannon, in which they discover a load of Battenberg has been hoarded because this resident kept forgetting that they'd bought it. And that was exactly the same. We found a load of mouldering lemon buns in my nan's microwave because she would just hide them, knowing that she wasn't supposed to have them. I'm going to go to a poem that just makes sense when you know me. For years on this channel, I have done wool gathering videos. It's been a while since I did one, but basically, I had this idea for a novel years ago, which was going to be entitled Wool Gathering, and I won't share any plot points because I've since rejigged them, and that's going to be the overarching storyline in the Ellis Valentine series. But then that the title obviously came from my wool gathering videos, and then Wool Gathering was actually the first poem that I ever managed to get printed, which was in Butcher's Dog. I think it was issue 13. It might have been earlier, it might have been different. I will leave a link in the description, but I don't know whether you can still order that edition. Anyway, this is one of the tedious tasks that I would get set to do, and I think you can just hear it. It's wool gathering. Dad sets a task to search the fields for wool. Locate all the stray pieces, pack them into Hessian sacks. The hard part is done, he says. His calloused hands think nothing of gorse or barbed wire. Anywhere the stray white frays get caught. I set out. I pick through sheep muck and thick mud for mere wisps of wool, memories of wool, shreds the dreg's belly feathers of wool. Press them amongst the full coats. Feel the wax of lanolin. And I think that that's as good a place as any to finish.
That was some poetry from Charles Heathcote from his collection Shepherd's Delight. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host Dane Cobain, and this is Betty Accorsi with Blue Wave.
The stones with their distinct shapes. I heard the sound of my pain walking so slowly. My breath, step by step, reached the briny water while she was bowing to the sun softly. Here I am, everything is now peace, but the wind can change a mirror in a labyrinth. I was so wrong to have chased that gun too much. Every moment carries happiness. with their distinct shapes. I heard the sound of my pain walking so slowly. My breath, step by step, reached the briny
I know it's only been a few years, but we've been through so much together. And I just want you to know I call you my friends forever. So when you need to break down, know that I'll be around to be your shoulder for you to cry on. I know you do the same. At the end of the day, I'm someone you can rely on. We'll keep moving onward, dear friends, knowing our fight will never stop. And we'll keep on moving onward till the end, when the last one of us drops. And we know all our flaws, and we know what makes us tick. And we remember when those outside the group decide that they wanna be a dick. 'Cause I remember when they let you down, and I know she's not around anymore. That must be so tough. So no, life's got its hardships, sometimes the path remains unlit, but we'll keep each other out of the rough. We'll keep moving onward, dear friends, knowing our fight will never stop. We'll keep on moving onward till the end, when the last one of us drops. We always know how to keep each other up. We still know that it's never all straight up. This long journey's just started, if ever reach its limits. But we don't care, 'cause the fun never stops, does it? I know we've had our bad times, sometimes friendships on the line, but we're all made up, and that I know is true. 'Cause we've got each other's back, something some people seem to lack, and I'm lucky I'm surrounded by you. And we'll keep moving onward, dear friends, knowing our fight will never stop. And we'll keep on moving onward till the bitter end, when the last one of us drops.
That was In the End by Dan Pride, and before that we had Blue Wave by Betty Accorsi. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host Dane Cobain, and it's time for us to be joined now by Twangling Jack Ford for some of his album reviews for this week's album review special.
Steppenwolf, an 8 CD box set called Magic Carpet Ride. They were a Canadian band called Sparrow, who moved to the west coast of America. They had a singer called John Kay, and a guitarist with the most excellent stage name of Mars Bonfire. Mars Bonfire left before they recorded their first album, but he left them with the key to their success. He wrote one of the all-time classic rock anthems, Born to be Wild. Born to be Wild was on the soundtrack to Easy Rider, along with the Steppenwolf cover of The Pusher. Born to be Wild became a hit all over the world, and I think many people assume that Steppenwolf were one-hit wonders. I have American cousins whose father was in the American forces stationed in Germany in the late 60s. And it was one of my cousins who was into Steppenwolf. Obviously I knew and loved Born to be Wild, but he had a number of their albums, some of which I also bought from the Army Base PX. I was familiar with all but the first 2 albums. Also, I had a greatest hits compilation. By my late teens I was totally over Steppenwolf, but I bought this box set for nostalgia's sake. I was surprised how much I have enjoyed listening to it 50 years later. It would appear I missed some of their finest moments. Some of the tracks on the first 2 albums I was not familiar with. The box set is named after the song Magic Carpet Ride, which was one of their other well-known singles and still sounds quite fresh. The Steppenwolf sound is guitars, organ and John Kay's gruff voice, all very much the sound of Born to be Wild. But like a lot of the late 60s band, they cover all kinds of styles: blues, soul, country and folk. They can be quite funky. They started out playing Chicago-style rhythm and blues, and this box set contains a live album of them before they made the first album, which is very raw and exciting and has Mars Bonfire on guitar. The guitar riffs tend to be a bit Hendrixy, a bit Foxy Lady. They use a lot of that abrasive chord that was the sound of the times, now known as the Hendrix chord. It can be heard in the instrumental break of Born to be Wild. The organ always swoops and swirls just like it should. As they progress, the sound gets harder, the production gets much better and the songs become less inspiring. The opening track on their final album is a catchy rocky number in several parts, including a grand piano section, but the album would not be worth buying separately. I think they peaked with the title track of their 4th album. Monster is a 12-minute epic in 3 parts that charts the development of America from the founding fathers to the Vietnam War. The whole album is made up of protest songs. They may seem twee now, but I was listening to them on a US Army base with teenagers who were facing the real possibility of being drafted. The box set also includes the Steppenwolf live album, which captures them at their peak, performing most of their best songs, including a long, extended version of Born to be Wild. Steppenwolf Magic Carpet Ride, a box set of all their albums that were released between 1967 and 1971. Steeleye Span, Pleased to See the King. I must admit I bought this album from the British Heart Foundation charity shop in Wickham simply because it was only £2 and is in perfect nick. I have never before owned anything by Steeleye Span, though I always quite liked them. I liked that their first hit was an a cappella Latin prayer, Gaudete Te. I liked that David Bowie played sax on their version of To Know Him Is to Love Him, even though it sounded awful to me at the time. I liked that they had hit singles with songs like All Around My Hat, that gave folk songs a 6/8 triplet boogie beat, like Status Quo. So much so that Status Quo covered it. I saw a later lineup of Steeleye Span do a Christmas show at the Hammersmith Odeon. I remember it well as they showered the audience with pound notes. Had I bought any Steeleye Span product back in the day, this would have been bottom of the list, because it has no drums. However, I now think it is better for it. There seems to me to be something a bit less authentic about English folk rock with drums. Steeleye Span on later albums used a full kit, whereas I think a current act would be more likely to use a bodhrán. There is an all too brief moment on this album where some sort of percussion almost does play a bodhrán beat. Electric folk rock bands, particularly when they are playing jigs and reels, often all land on the same beat, making it jump out unnaturally. This lineup of Steeleye Span hits those same beats, but it is much less jerky. Ashley Hutchins plays the kind of pulsing lead bass that he had played with Fairport Convention, and that also compensates for the lack of drums. The singing is perfect. All the songs are traditional and sung in that finger in the ear, woolly jumper, wet dog by the fire folk style. Maddie Pryor was the folk singer of her generation, especially after the demise of Sandy Denny, and I loved the sound of Martin Carthy's electric guitar. His arpeggios have a perfect jingle jangle that shines through, having no cymbals to compete with. The album ends with an excellent a cappella piece. My favourite song is led by a wobbly tremolo guitar that is much more psychedelic 1960s than you would expect in 1971 when this was released. It was always going to be my favourite, as it sounds a bit like Jefferson Airplane. Martin Carthy is British folk royalty, and along with Fairport Convention was a pioneer in the folk rock genre. I saw Martin Carthy with Dave Schwarbrick at Wickham Arts Centre. Pleased to see the King, Steel Eye Span. Spirit, the 12 Dreams of Dr. Sardonicus. Spirit songs are too subtle to be sing-along hits, but this is an album that has everything. Fantastic vocal harmonies, great solos, the occasional rock out, a touch of jazz swing, big horn riffs, classically inspired piano and moving climaxes, but nothing obviously contrived or especially commercial. I often listen to this album, and if I do, I listen to it all the way through. There is nothing you would choose to skip once you had started it. It is an album that appears on classic album lists, though Spirit were the forgotten West Coast rock band even in their heyday. The only Spirit song I ever heard when I was young was their single Fresh Garbage, which was used as the theme to a serious rock music programme on Radio London. It is a strange song, but it was impossible to place in a genre back when I liked the certainty of genres. The only thing about Spirit I knew and liked was the hit single Run 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 by Jojo Gunn, who were a Spirit offshoot band. Now they are better known for a court case. The estate of their late frontman Randy California sued Led Zeppelin, claiming they had copied part of the Spirit song called Taurus for the intro to Stairway to Heaven. You may listen to this album once and wonder what all the fuss is about. A few more times and the song Nature's Way will get stuck in your head. A few more listens and you may be moved by the hippie-ish anthems and the song Nothing to Hide. Or maybe the non-album single that is only on the CD. And then one day, maybe after a number of years, you will play this album and it will be like meeting up with old friends. It was not popular at the time of its release, possibly because it did not sound of that time. But that may be why it does not sound too dated. Spirit, the 12 Dreams of Dr. Sardonicus. Floodland, the Sisters of Mercy. Vinyl collections must be one of the worst victims of our itinerant lifestyles. I left LPs with people and lost contact, but I have also gained some, though in much smaller numbers. The ones I gained only got a spin once I had a turntable. One such LP is Floodland by the Sisters of Mercy. I missed out on the Sisters of Mercy and much of the music of that period, when big companies were signing goth bands. I sort of noticed when Wayne Hussey, an ex-member of Sisters of Mercy, made a record called Wasteland that was impossible to ignore, such was its ubiquitous coverage. After Hussey left, Sisters of Mercy were basically one man, Andrew Eldridge. This album is not as arty as Bauhaus, or as tribal and threatening as Spear of Destiny or Killing Joke. It is a style I have never really felt the need to revisit. The only thing I really admired was the capes and eyeliner. It was a time of deep, dark baritones singing over washes of highly affected guitars, deep, stabby synth bass, and simple robotic drums reverbed to sound like they were playing inside oil drums. I had one of the first affordable digital reverbs, and I'm sure it actually had a setting called oil drum. One of the songs on this album has an interesting use of a Russian mode, giving it a slightly more exotic sound. However, the main event is the single This Corrosion, produced by Jim Steinman. Jim Steinman wrote Bat Out of Hell, though he did not produce it. But he went on to go well over the top with his own work, and most notably Total Eclipse of the Heart. I am not sure that This Corrosion is that much of a song, but it is one hell of a track, with choirs of voices. Steinman replaced the robotic drums with that dancing in the dark beat. You could almost picture Courtney Cox doing that 80s dance, or Molly Ringwald dancing to the Psychedelic Furs. It got to number 7 in the UK charts and the band appeared on Top of the Pops. It is an 80s production, but I could listen to it in very small doses. I don't even particularly like Dancing in the Dark, though I am quite a Springsteen fan. Floodland, Sisters of Mercy.
You're listening to The Archer on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host Dane Cobain and this is Jazz Dillon with Patient.
Said I should be open, I could let people closer, but I keep on holding back, it gets worse every time I'm choked up. And when I get my hopes up, it isn't worth the trying. Looking at it closer, always seems to show up that you are a liar. Looking at it closer, always seems to show up that you are a liar.
That was Patient by Jazz Dillon. You're listening to The Archer on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host Dane Cobain. And it's time for us to get back to Twangling Jack Ford for some more of his album reviews for this Twangling Jack album review special.
Susie and the Banshees, A Kiss in the Dream House, their 1989 album. It must have been a strain for London goths to find the same level of misery to wallow in as their northern counterparts. I found this LP in a pile left by my brother who went to live abroad. He is 10 years younger than me and goth was his thing. This LP does all the goth things, staccato lead guitar lines and heavily affected choppy guitar chord work. John McKeough was a very highly rated and influential guitar player. Likewise, Budgie the drummer was a much sought after performer. Budgie gives it that big tom-tom beat, and Steve Severin plays exactly the right bass and wrote some very interesting lyrics. Playing it has turned out to be much more fun than I expected. The first side has a very cheery up-tempo number called She's a Carnival, and a very interesting final track that seems to be built on a tape loop that could have been a component in a Steve Reich composition. On top of it, Susie sings what for me is her most interesting vocal, sometimes using the kind of melody Scott Walker sang in his avant-garde works. I don't know how this would sound to today's music audience because not being in tune was quite a feature, with unexpected oddly tuned instruments appearing, with some of Susie's vocals having that Marlene Dietrich tonality, and with the droning and flanging of the guitars. It is in places quite pleasantly jarring, like a Kurt Weill musical or a Tom Waits Junkyard excursion. But there are occasions where the guitars are not modulating, when the vocals are perfectly in tune, when there are harmonious backing vocals and even some tinkly tuned percussion. And it is like the clouds being parted, bathing everything in bright moonlight. Towards the end it all starts to try to be Blondie-like pop gone rogue, and the Peggy Lee of your nightmares. It ends with that big Springsteen snare and 80s MTV pop production that would have made it sound like the most up-to-date and commercial track on the album, though now it sounds to me like the most dated and redundant. Though real strings appear and hint at the Psycho's shower, but then they lose their nerve and hold back on being truly stabby. A Kiss in the Dream House, Susie and the Banshees. Robin Hitchcock and the Egyptians, Gotta Let This Hen Out. Robin Hitchcock formed the Soft Boys in 1976. They were a psychedelic band while everyone else was going punk. They were looked down on at the time, but have since been elevated to being regarded as highly influential. They were an influence on R.E.M. amongst others. I was part of a sound crew that worked on one of the last Soft Boys gigs before Hitchcock went solo. I had made the mistake of believing their reputation, so I had no expectations, but it was one of the best gigs I was ever paid to watch. They had some great songs. The other leader of the Soft Boys was Kimberly Rue, who went on to form Katrina and the Waves and wrote Walking on Sunshine, and their song that won the Eurovision Song Contest. The Soft Boys had a great song called I Want to Destroy You that should have been a big hit. I followed what Robin Hitchcock was doing, and a friend made me a tape of this live album and the studio album from which the songs came. I also have a 12-inch single of the song Heaven, which is a glorious jangly chunk of optimism and harmonies. Robin Hitchcock and the Egyptians were probably one of the last bands I followed on the gig circuit. I saw them in a number of London venues and they were excellent. It may have been the last time I got excited about a band till I discovered Pulp 10 years later. Hitchcock always had a surreal sense of humour. The songs had weird lyrics. They would be punctuated with strange observations, streams of absurdist non sequiturs, Python-esque, Reeves and Mortimer-esque even. His songwriting at the time seemed to be heavily influenced by Syd Barrett, and that was probably why he spelt Robin with a Y, like Sid with a Y. The songs had titles like My Wife and My Dead Wife, and The Man with the Light Bulb Head. They had a song that became their signature tune, Brenda's Iron Sledge. At their gigs we would all join in the chorus. All aboard Brenda's Iron Sledge, please don't call me Reg, it's not my name. The album title, Got to Let This Hen Out, is a reference to a lyric Hitchcock misheard whilst listening to the Higsons, probably on the John Peel Show. The Higsons were always on the John Peel Show. They were Charlie Higson's band. Robin Hitchcock and the Egyptians performed the song Listening to the Higsons on this album. It is a very catchy song which they always came close to destroying by swapping all the instruments around. I was amazed how much I still liked this album, though it does sound very mid-80s, with harsh synth tones, clanky bass, flangey chorus guitar and big reverbed drums. There has recently been a television documentary about Robin Hitchcock named after one of his well-known acoustic songs, I Often Dream of Trains. Robin Hitchcock and the Egyptians, Got to Let This Hen Out. Paul Young, No Parley. An LP I found in the Salvation Army charity shop in Wickham for £2. It is an album I used to have on cassette when it first came out in 1983. It is one of those albums I once played to death and then never want to hear again ever in my whole life. I bought this LP because it was, for good or bad, a landmark in musical production. And it is an interesting artefact from my musical past. I originally bought it because I'd heard numerous tracks on the radio, including the first hit single, a cover of Marvin Gaye's Wherever I Lay My Hat, with Pino Palladino's sliding bass, that was novel at the time. I was already familiar with Paul Young. I had seen his first band playing in the King's Head on Harrow Hill. They later had a hit with the song Toast, which was revived after Paul Young became famous. It was very much his laughing gnome. But I was mostly familiar with his band The Q-Tips. who were like a soul review band. I missed Q-Tips when they also played some early gigs in Harrow, but I did catch them at the Venue in Victoria after they had become quite well known. I also had the Q-Tips album on cassette. The album No Parley was talked up at the time as a triumph of modern production. I was doing a lot of recording and I thought I needed to examine it in detail just to keep up. It was the beginning of the age of digital sound. Everything had a glossy sheen. People in the 80s used to listen to production as much as performance or songs. Even people not involved with recording would appreciate the Duran Duran orchestral strikes and the crazy non-musical effects like the noise that suddenly appears in Owner of a Lonely Heart by Yes, turning it from an average song by an unfashionable band into the primary example of the state of the art of noise. The No Parley album had a cover of Love of the Common People that was quite fun. It also featured a couple of backing singers who were being used a lot at the time. They called themselves the Fabulous Wealthy Tarts. Laurie Latham, the producer, used these backing singers to great effect, but not just to back up the choruses, but also to add vocal sounds that punctuated the sung lines, with random syllables, sexual squeals, moans and groans and touches of scat and African chanting. Sometimes the bass isn't slidey but is funky and slappy. The drums sound massive, with tons of reverb that sometimes abruptly and unnaturally disappears. And that was another sound of the times. Staccato noises appear in one speaker and then out of the other. There are stringy pads and worst of all there is a digital synth xylophone sound that mercifully quickly went out of fashion. There is also a cover of Love Will Tear Us Apart Again, which purists thought was sacrilege, but I saw it more as a tribute. I also much prefer the Joy Division original, but Paul Young drew attention to it. There were some original songs written by Paul Young, along with his musical partner who had been with him in the Q-Tips. 3 of the songs were written by the songwriter Jack Lee, who also wrote Hanging on the Telephone, which was covered by Blondie. The best known Jack Lee song on this album is Come Back and Stay. But the problem is that the thing that sounded new became the sound of the times, and there was to be years and years and years of that kind of thing. So much so that not only did I never listen to it again, but as the 80s wore on I stopped listening to popular music altogether. Those were my opera years that were only brought to an end by Britpop.
Big thank you to Twangling Jack for this week's album reviews. You're listening to The Archer on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host Dane Cobain and this is Lunar Barge with Adventure.
2, 3, 4. We're going on an adventure. This land is ours to roam. Open your eyes and get ready. We're gonna make this world our home. So grab some snacks and jump in the car when the sun begins to yawn. All we need is just you and me and a road pointing for the door. This is our adventure, take chances while we can, and I know no better plan. This is our adventure, gonna write it on the page, and I'll meet you on the stage. We're climbing high on the hills, meeting monsters on the way. So keep your eyes on the road, this could be our lucky day. Catching stars on our fingertips, where the darkness swallows our view. We can fall from time to time, but we'll know just what to do. This is our adventure, take chances while we can, and I know no better plan. This is our adventure, gonna write it on the page, and I'll meet you on the stage. We're running through the trees and we're scraping up our knees. We've been chased by dinosaurs while the rainstorm pours. Picked each other up when we've fallen down, and then we laugh until we cry. We keep going, we'll never give up. We're gonna soar into the sky. This is our adventure, let's run away together. Let's make it last forever. This is our adventure, we're gonna see the sights. It's gonna last the rest of our lives. This is our adventure, take chances while we can, and I know no better plan. This is our adventure, gonna write it on the page, and I'll meet you on the stage. Ooh, yeah, I'll meet you on the stage. Ooh, yeah, I'll meet you on the stage. Yeah. Ooh, yeah, I'll meet you on the stage. Ooh, I'll meet you on the stage.
When life comes at you in full force, steady yourself and try to stay on course. Keep up the fight and show no remorse. Don't lose hope, hope is your power and your source. Just because I'm strong enough to handle some pain doesn't mean I deserve it in any way. I'll keep fighting and give it all that it takes to never to allow defeat to show on my face. Fight back, I stand fight back. Always stay on the attack. So fight back, I stand fight back. Always stay on the attack. So fight
track down the cure.
That was Biting Back by Humans Can't Reboot, and before that we had Adventure by Lunar Barge. You're listening to The Archer on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain. This is the part of the show where we would normally head over to the Oak Shed for an album review courtesy of Twangling Jack Ford, but of course it has been a Twangling Jack album review special. So instead, we're at the end. You can find us as always on Facebook. If you search for The Archer on Wickham Sound, you should be able to find us. We are repeated on Wickham Sound on Monday nights. We're on the Wickham Sound Listen Again, iTunes, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Please do leave us a short review on your podcast platform of choice. And you can reach out to me here at the studio on dane.cobain at wickhamsound.org.uk. That's dane.cobain at wickhamsound.org.uk. So I'm going to leave you with one last tune, and this is the incredible Simon Gregory with Call of Duty. I'll catch you next week.
To school, but I worked my father's land. I'd never been 10 miles from our home, but after 15 summers I could ride and I could shoot, and I ventured to the county fair alone. The sergeant in the army tent had shillings on his drum, and his stories and the ale called to me. Before I knew it, I'd received my shilling and a gun, off to fight the French for my king and country. And it wasn't just the foe who saw us coming, as we marched in line with rifles in our hands, and slaughtered boys who looked like us but spoke another tongue, to decide which rich man got to rule the land. Rule the land.
2 centuries on, it's still the same. Everything's different, but nothing's changed.
I wasn't good at school, and I couldn't find a job that required all the skills I'd learned at home. A life of watching movies, playing Xbox, flying drones doesn't fit you for a standard office clone. But I'd seen all the recruitment advertising, let us make you into all that you can be. And before I knew it, I'd received a buzz cut and a gun, and the rest is military history. History. We'd make friends to last a lifetime. They never said how long that life would be. Those of us who made it back were not the boys who left our homes to answer to the call of our duty. They promised we'd come back covered in glory. We'd be heroes and our country would be proud. But who has worked for men who've seen too much and can't forget the things they've done and blood spill on that foreign ground? And it wasn't just the foe who saw us coming as we stood there with our papers in our hands. It wasn't in the desert or the field or in the trench, but on the home front where we took our final stand. It wasn't just the foe who saw us coming as we stood there with our papers in our hands. It wasn't in the desert or the field or in the trench, but on the home front where we took our final stand. The final stand.
The land, who makes the choice, who makes the profit, who pays the price.